warning signs that you look around and see that perhaps sometimes the directors either don't see or have blinded themselves to?
Often there's too much stock lying about, usually redundant. Often you'll see too many people in the front office, and they've been making cutbacks, and there's nobody really left on the workshop floor, if it's that sort of business.
And should directors be taking that example and looking at it? Should they be trying to look through your eyes?
Well, yes, they should be, but whether they can or not, because directors typically can't see the wood for the trees, and it needs somebody to come in from outside. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be me. It can be anybody who looks at it from an external viewpoint, and particularly if you don't know too much about the background.
Yeah, there are more and more things that are quite tricky to deal with when you get to an insolvency situation. You need to talk to the directors to find out what the current financial position is. And quite often you will find that directors have been drawing money out of the company without paying PAYE on it. So quite rightly, it is debited to their overdrawn loan account, which means that they owe that money back to the company. It doesn't necessarily mean that the company is in a worse position. I mean, to some extent, they've been doing it as a tax-saving reason, which is perfectly okay to do with a solvent, good company, although there are rules about having an overdrawn loan account. But it does come home to roost when you go bust. So we need to look at that. Another thing that directors do is to draw money out as dividends. And again, dividends are strictly payable out of a business's profits. And if they're making losses, then they're not entitled to draw dividends. So those dividends can be illegal dividends and are repayable.
So the creditors can demand, or whoever it is that's involved in the winding up order can demand those monies back in?
Certainly it's something that the insolvency practitioner has got to look at to see whether in some cases it can be a proper use of the company's funds, and I think we're all debating as to exactly how harsh we should be in order to collect those monies back. Because at the end of the day, the company has not necessarily lost out. If they've just taken a reasonable amount, equivalent to a reasonable salary, then there's an argument to say the company is in no worse position. Certainly if they've been taking bucket loads of money out, then we would certainly go after them. If it's a reasonable amount, then we will look sympathetically and discuss the situation with the directors.
When you've got a limited company and it's struggling and perhaps it's quite personal to you, maybe it's a family company, where do the limits come on what you should perhaps be personally, putting back into the company? How much of your own personal money should you risk putting into a company, or is there not a simple equation?
Well, there certainly isn't a simple answer as to how much money you should put in. What I would say is that if the world was run by accountants and insolvency practitioners, it would never really get started in the first place because we're so cautious. We need entrepreneurs. We need entrepreneurs to take risk, and really insolvency is what happens when the risk doesn't quite work out. But an awful lot of companies go on and thrive. So I'm sure that if you ask your accountant or your insolvency practitioner, they would say, "Oh no, I wouldn't put that into it." But obviously, an entrepreneur wants to keep going, and he probably has some faith in the company. So he should put it in. But there are techniques of putting it in safely, and there's no point in throwing the family silver into the old pot unless there's a realistic chance of coming out the other side. And we can help provide them with some evidence as to whether what they're doing is daft or not.
Let's talk about personal guarantees. A limited company, you can walk away from a lot. You can't walk away from personal guarantees.
No, I think it's quite traditional in bank loans and bank overdrafts to give a guarantee. But if you're giving a personal guarantee to the bank, you should always insist that the bank takes a debenture, because that way the bank lifts up in the priority list of creditors, and if the bank is secured, then your guarantee is partially secured. What you don't want to do is be guaranteeing the bank of a limited company and not insisting that the bank takes out a debenture. A lot of people get caught, I don't know if caught's the right word, but they don't realise that they've given guarantees on HP agreements and lease agreements. They sign the bottom of the lease agreement enthusiastically on behalf of the company, because again, they're entrepreneurs and they want to expand. But quite often they end up signing twice, one of which is a guarantee. So they need to be very careful about that.
So once a company's gone into insolvency, the liquidator has to look to see whether everything's been done properly. One of the big areas that directors are currently getting wrong is they're continuing to get paid by dividends after the company no longer has distributable reserves. It's all a bit technical, but basically the minute you're aware that the company is headed for difficulty, you should really stop taking payments out of the company through dividends, take it out in salary instead.
And in terms of the director's loan account as well, that's something that can be misunderstood.
So that's right. What a lot of directors do is they just draw money out of the business every month or as they go along, and then at the end of the year the accountant takes a look at it and a dividend is declared, and that dividend goes against the loan account, making it all square again. Problem comes if the music stops halfway through the year, company goes into liquidation, it's then too late to declare a dividend, and you're left with a loan account at exactly the time when you least need it, because you've lost your company and you've lost your income.
I then try and identify with the director, what are the things I'm looking for, and what I'm looking for is the company solvent or insolvent. That's the starting point. If you identify that the company is insolvent, then a few different rules come into play from the normal business rules. So, for example, your primary duty switches from acting in the interest of shareholders to acting in the interest of creditors. And it's important that directors know the point where they're going to become insolvent, because that brings in some potential personal liabilities, and it's important to understand what they are. And so they're things like, paying yourself in preference to anyone else, or paying other creditors in preference. Don't take money or assets out of the business, or don't sell things or give things away. They're fairly standard, common sense type of transactions that you wouldn't normally think about doing, but in that situation they are difficult they're easy to overturn by a liquidator. So I'll give a bit of a chat about the things that you could do wrong or could have already done wrong. One of the things that directors are often quite concerned about is something called wrongful trading, or trading while insolvent. So they think that trading while insolvent is illegal, but actually that's not the definition of trading while insolvent. It's trading beyond the point at which you knew or ought to have known that you couldn't avoid going into liquidation. So put into English, what that means is if you recognise you're insolvent and you form a plan going forward, and that plan is sensible, and the plan basically, I do a little graph with my hand that says, if you're trading along like this and you're overdraft and you go down like this and then up like that, then that's probably okay. But if your projection is looking like this and it keeps going down, then really you should stop. So if you have a plan and you try and execute it, and even if that plan doesn't get all the way through to completion, so long as you keep reviewing it and stop at the right point, then you're not doing anything wrong. And directors don't often realise that so long as you've got a plan, you can trade through. So that can be quite helpful, and sometimes that helps them to avoid going into liquidation, and they can put forward their plan, keep track of their targets and objectives, minute everything that they do, and that helps that way.
Let's say that's not the case, there is no other avenue, you are brought in as administrators. What does that then mean, and in particular what does it mean to your creditors and to your staff?
Well, just using that term administrators, you're making a giant leap from the first conversation to me being appointed. There's a whole host of things that happen between those 2 points. So the term administrator refers to a specific type of insolvency appointment, and there's a number of different insolvency regimes that we can put in place, all do slightly different things. So we would work through each of the possible scenarios: company voluntary arrangement, administration, liquidation, and try and work out which solution is going to be best for both the company and for its creditors. So just looping it straight into administration isn't necessarily the right thing.
And in the event of a liquidation?
So liquidation, typically, we've decided collectively with the directors that that's the best thing for the company and its creditors, and typically that is where the company has run out of steam. There is no hope, there is no viable business that can be sold on, there is no point in trading it on through an administration, and really the best thing to do is to put the company out of its misery and put it down. So it's the veterinary equivalent of putting an animal down. And we try to do it in a humane way. It doesn't happen instantaneously. We gather information from the director, list of creditors, list of assets. We put them into our systems. We write out to the creditors and the shareholders of the business, and we have a meeting of the shareholders and the creditors. It's normally on the same day. I say the minimum time it takes is about 2 weeks. From the point where you say, yes, let's put it in liquidation, to the point of having the meeting. Up until that 2 week period, the directors are still in control, they're still dealing with things. We're sat there in the background helping them out. Things are going to be difficult during that time. Creditors are going to be calling, but they've had a letter from us saying that the company's going to go into liquidation, so they're not likely to be knocking on the door, they're not likely to be doing anything too aggressive. They'll direct all their communications to us. So on the day of the liquidation, there's a meeting of the company members. Often it's just me and the director, to be honest, just sat there. And then immediately following that is a meeting of the creditors. Again, we don't seem to have that many creditors turn up to meetings. Most of them vote by proxy. Occasionally, again, it's just me and the director sat there. We sign a few bits of paper and the company moves into liquidation, and then we go about realising the assets.